What's up, guys? Welcome back to more Reddit stories about entitled people, crazy people, and everything in between. Hope you're all doing awesome today. Be sure to subscribe if you're new here, and as usual, we're getting right into today's Reddit posts. Turn my service off right now. Okay. I work for a major cable internet, TV, and home phone provider. The one that is probably the most hated. You know the one. The department I work in is responsible for either saving a customer or turning their services off. Call came in, transferred from our tech support team, and by this time the customer was already on the phone for an hour. Tech agent was able to get service back up and running, but he was now asking for a large credit for 1 day of service out. As soon as I got on the phone, it was demands. Here's what you're going to do. If you can't do this, then turn my service off immediately. I no longer want to be a customer. I tried to calmly explain to this very rude man that I could not credit him over $200 for 1 day of service, but would be more than happy to process a credit more appropriate. He declined, and again demanded that his service be turned off, quote, immediately. I reiterated the immediately part to him, and he says, yep, right now. Cue malicious compliance. I turned off all his services right there that very second. He starts screaming that he was watching that, and what am I going to do without internet? I told him that I was only doing what he asked. This ended with me restoring service and giving him a credit appropriate to his 1 day outage, which we figured out was user error on his end. Man freaked out when he found out I'm not part of his HOA. My parents had this rental property that they passed on to me when they died, and the house has been there since before the neighborhood next to it was built, so it's not part of its homeowners association. It's been established several times with the previous renters and my parents. While we were renovating to prepare to move in, we installed gates at the 3 entrances to the property because we didn't want people to come into the property. A month after we finished, we had a visit from this guy who opened our back gate since the front one is locked, just to give us the welcome to the HOA packet. I told him that we are not part of the neighborhood, so the HOA doesn't apply to our property. He huffed and said that I am, since his property is right next door. I nicely repeated myself and asked him to not come into my property again without permission. He scoffed, saying he didn't see any no trespassing signs, so he could do what he wanted. Eventually, he left. The next day, we installed locks on the gates and no trespassing signs. The next thing we know, we are getting HOA violation letters in our mailbox. The letters also listed things that were happening in our backyard that someone could only see if they were looking over the fence. After the 5th notice that threatened eviction, I called the number listed and explained to a lady the situation. And she said the HOA president said we were part of the HOA and was the one reporting us, but all we had to do was prove we weren't, and they would waive the fines and leave us alone. I gathered the paperwork and went to the next meeting where I gave them the paperwork, which proved I was right. The man then lost his mind and said it didn't matter, and we still needed to follow his rules and change the things he wanted. Apparently, the reason he was upset is that we installed gates and fixed the fence that prevented him from going where he wanted when he went on his walks. The gates and fence also prevents his family from taking a shortcut to the pool. The backyard was filled with things he didn't want to see from his 2nd-story balcony, and the trees we planted and the new fence prevented him from seeing our entire property. He got so angry that he needed to be brought to a different room. I left the meeting soon after, but I haven't heard a thing since. It's amazing how entitled some people are. Yeah, OP definitely went above and beyond to prove that they're not part of the HOA just to get them off their backs. Because honestly, it's not OP's responsibility to prove that they're not part of the HOA, it's the HOA's responsibility to prove that they are part of it. If they're gonna go as far as send them violations and even threaten eviction, then they better at least have some paperwork to back it up showing that they have them on file. Which obviously they didn't, since OP was never part of it to begin with. So the fact that they would even send violations to someone that they don't even have on record is honestly pretty baffling. But it does sound like it was mainly just because of one guy on a power trip. What happens if I poke this alarm? I used to work with kids from a tough area. Very fun but very rowdy crowd. We would occasionally take them for longer weekends away where we would book a center and stay over. So we are playing games in a communal area having fun, and one of the kids starts poking at a break glass fire alarm as a joke. I don't know if you have these where you are, but they have a small pane of very thin glass over a button, and if you break the glass, the alarm goes off and you can't reset it. Immediately, we are hands out. Hey, no, don't press that, step away please. And he's grinning away, poking at it more and more. Absolutely, inevitably, it goes off. The thing is, this most predictable of outcomes, the only possible outcome of his actions, the one and only thing this device is designed to do, came as a massive surprise to him. As soon as the horrible sound started, he looked totally shocked. We had to file outside and wait for the fire brigade, and he looked 1000% sorry. We weren't even mad, he was just very thick. It honestly did not occur to him this could happen. Sometimes the telling life has just given you cannot be topped. No point in shouting. He was always one of my favorite kids. Random lady yells at me for taking pictures of bees and follows me to film me walking with my infant. This happened about 10 years ago. I was walking in my neighborhood with my infant son, who was about 14 months old. One of our favorite features of the neighborhood was a beehive that had formed inside of a wall along the street. I always enjoyed watching the bees fly in and out, as did my son. I grew up around bees, and honeybees are quite docile unless you mess with them. Americans are irrationally afraid of flying insects, in my opinion. I was perfectly comfortable parking my baby near some bees in order to take a picture. For anyone concerned, he was at least 5 feet from the entrance of the hive. We've parked here to observe the bees many times without incident. I took my pictures and continued on my walk. 5 minutes or so later, I hear a car following me. Maybe they are waiting to enter their driveway and I'm walking across the sidewalk blocking it, so I turn and look for a turn signal or something. Instead, there is an old truck about 10 feet behind me, with an iPhone pointed at me. I was confused, but also nervous, so I just kept walking. This truck then pulls up beside me, and this woman starts yelling, "What do you think you're doing?" Confused, I was like, "Walking my baby." She then goes, "What are you doing with my bees?" I said, "I took a picture of them." She waves her phone and says, "I don't think so. I asked you what you think you're doing." Still confused, I said again, "I took a picture of the bees. This really is all I was doing." The lady says, "Why are you there with your baby?" At this point, I thought I understood that she was critical of my decision to have my son so near the bees, so I told her, "I don't really care what you think, I'm just taking a picture." She then started to say, "I don't believe you. Why would you have your baby near the bees? I think I'm going to hear from you again." This whole time I was actively walking along the street, and this crazy person was following me, filming, while I had my baby in a stroller. I repeated that I didn't care what she thought, and she finally moved on, yelling again, "I bet I'll hear from you." Now, fellow Redditors, I have no idea who this woman is. Does she own the bees? No. The bees are actually in a shared wall, shared between 2 houses and a commercial property. The wall must have an owner, but it is probably owned by all 3 properties. The entrance to the hive was on the commercial side of the wall. After 10 years of reflection, I think she must have been the commercial property owner, and she thought I would park my baby by the bees to intentionally get him stung so that I could sue her. So she felt she needed to stalk a young mother with her infant and yell at me on the street in order to protect herself from me. Karen hits car, calls cops on herself. Not my story, but happened to my friend last week. Teenage stepdaughter is waiting in line at the gas station to fill up. The car in front of her pulls off, so she goes to pull up to the pump. Cue a woman in a brand new rental car. She was at the pump on the opposite side, and once she pulled up, realized her pump was broken. So she proceeded to try and whip around to the opposite pump, cutting off stepdaughter and stealing her pump. The only problem is that she hit the stepdaughter's car trying to cut so sharp. She jumps out, saying she thinks stepdaughter hit her, so stepdaughter yells back at her. Karen gets back in her car and says she's calling the cops because she feels threatened. Tells her sob story to the cops. This disrespectful teenager hit her car and threatened her. So cop shows up, takes both statements. The lady lies and says she was sitting still and stepdaughter clipped her. Stepdaughter says basically the same thing except reversed. And you know, the truth. Cop nods and says, "Well, no problem. This gas station has great security cameras. We'll just check the tape." Karen goes white and suddenly shuts up. Cop comes out chuckling 5 minutes later, tells stepdaughter, "Yeah, she is clearly lying. The camera clearly shows her trying to cut you off and steal the pump, and she hit you while you were not moving. So the cop goes and lectures the lady about her driving. So this lady called the cops all to get an accident report written up showing she is clearly, fully at fault for the accident. So stepdaughter is filing it fully on the lady's insurance for any damage. Funniest part is stepdaughter drives a clunker, and had the lady just politely apologized, stepdaughter would have probably just let it go because it barely left a mark. But instead, she wanted to intimidate the teenager and lie when she clearly knew she was at fault. Nice to see some karma. Entitled people on ATVs trespassing. Happened late this afternoon. My wife and I own 20 acres of land in the Colorado mountains. Our house sits at the top of our land at 10,000 feet, overlooking our property below and the rest of the valley in the area. Our driveway is about a mile long and the entrance is clearly marked with poles on either side, and a house number. Along the driveway there are about 10 to 12 signs posted that say, private property, no trespassing, keep out, no right to roam this land, etc. Anyone coming down our driveway would have to pass these clearly marked signs. This afternoon, my wife and I are in the lower part of our property, working on demoing an old cabin that we're taking down, and we hear ATVs coming down our driveway. I immediately jump in the pickup and race up the mountain and come across several men, who appear to be in their 70s and 80s sitting on their ATVs about 20 to 30 feet in front of our house. When I approached them, they kind of seemed shocked that I was there. I asked them if they knew they were trespassing on our private property, and one of them stated that they were enjoying the view. He ignored the fact that I said they were trespassing. He then went on to ask if there was a way to continue on our property to get to the next mountain. I said no, the whole valley, including where you're trespassing now, is all private property. They ended up talking about how they've owned land in a certain area, which is several miles away. I tried to remain calm and polite through the thing, but they never did apologize. Said we will stop trespassing and get out of here, as if I was the asshole for stopping and inconveniencing them. Alright guys, that's all for today. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to leave a like, and also hit that subscribe button so you can be notified when we upload. So have a nice day everyone, and I'll see you next time.